Hello, my name is Jameel and I'm a veteran esoteric scholar. And in my last video, I was going over the music industry and how I gained my knowledge of the music industry and the area I live at, some of the people I know, some of my associations, learning about the music industry, some people I met. There was a good, there was a close member, close member, somebody who's very close to my family, and New Birth is from Muskegon. And it was a man who's very close to my family, and he used to go on tour with the group New Birth. And New Birth is from Muskegon, Michigan. And a lot of people don't know Al Green used to live in Muskegon Heights, Michigan. A lot of people don't even know that. But so a friend of the family, he used to go on tour with New Birth, and he went out and went on tours with them everywhere, and he learned about the music industry. And so when I was growing up, he was affiliated with the rap studio Fistful of Dollars, and his name is, I call him Bone, but he's known as Kel Bone. And he used to stay. His family is well known. He used to stay on the corner of Wood and Hackley, and his family is one of the most known families in Muskegon Heights, even downtown. And we used to all hang out over there. There were guys like Knuckles, Preacher Man, Priest, Macho. And for the people who lived in Muskegon Heights around this time in the 90s, they're going to know who these people are. They're involved with all the music, the Fistful of Dollars studio, the rap. And so I used to sit there and watch these people make music and do studio albums. And at the time, I didn't really know anything about computers. I was familiar with computers, but I didn't know anything about making music on computers. And there was all sorts of other people that used to come and go from the studio, and I used to learn things. Like, one of the first things I picked up is, the person who owns all the copyrights to the music is the person who actually writes the music. It's not the rapper, it's not the rock musician, it's not the lead singer, it's not the producer, it's not the director if you're doing film. It's the script writer, the guy who writes the song. Whoever writes the song, that's the person who has the most credibility in the music industry. It's the songwriter. So I started learning these little things, and as I got older, I moved. As I got older, I'm from, originally my family, I'm from Muskegon Heights, but as I got older, I started, we moved out of the area, and I started hanging around people who were predominantly white. We lived in an area that was more predominantly white area, high class, prep type younger people used to come over to my house and hang out with me. And it was strange because I didn't know them, but they just started hanging around me. They just they appeared to like something about me, so they started coming around. And they would say, "Oh, Jameel, you know people who do rap music?" I was like, "Yeah, I know people who do rap music." And they didn't really get it. They thought it was kind of funny. They said, you know people from Muskegon Heights, blah, blah, blah. So, but to white people who live in the middle class or the upper middle class, they don't really know anything about the black culture. They see black people on the news and they see black people doing rap, but they really don't know anything about black people or what black people go through. But they were saying, "Oh, you know people who smoke pot. Can you get us some pot?" That type of thing. And these were all preppy kids, and they all came from money, and they had nice cars. And I would just sit there kind of tripping off of, like, because I grew up in an area, like I said, my best friend, he's a rapper. And we grew up in an area where you watched people sell drugs. You watched people chop up big plates of crack. You watched people have, guys had automatic machine guns and stuff like that. So none of that stuff surprised me. I know people who are doing life in prison. I know people who when I was growing up, used to watch these people pull machine guns out of the trunks of their cars. But that lifestyle never attracted me. I never, at that time I was growing up. And so moving out to where these white kids lived, they never seen anything like that before. So it shocked them. It wasn't shocking to me. I thought it was kind of, that's what you see when you go into the ghetto, that's what you see. That's just what you see. So a lot of them were asking me questions about the music industry and how the music industry works. So I'd tell them about the rappers, and I'd get CDs for them. They'd want rap CDs, underground rap CDs from Sking. I'd get CDs for them. And me, myself, what was I doing? I was hanging out with some of my friends coming from the west side. We all went to the same elementary school together. We all went to Loftus Elementary School together. And Razor, we all grew up. They all know me. They all know Razor. They all was the Twins. Anybody from the Heights would know the Twins, or anybody on 7th Street, Greasy or Poopsie. Everybody who in that area would know who I'm talking about, who I was around. But so I grew up sitting back and watching these guys make music and do their little street hustles and stuff like that. But I would spend a lot of time with my grandfather. My grandfather was a well-educated man. He flew for Transworld Airlines. And he would teach me about all sorts of things. He would teach me about astronomy. He would teach me about astrophysics. He would teach me about science. He would teach me about things that the general school system doesn't teach people. He would sit down and explain to me how you work an airplane, how airplanes fly. What else would... He explained a lot to me about World War II. And so I would go back over into these neighborhoods and sit there and talk to people. And I'd be talking about stuff like World War II and the Nazis. And a lot of people in the hood, they'd be like, man, how do you know about all this stuff? I'd be like, my grandfather taught me about it. And and I'd have books and all this stuff, and I'd show people the books. Now, as I got older, I didn't like school. I didn't think too much of school. And I was like a class clown. Like, I just laughed in school the whole time. And I sort of grew out of the school thing. I just wanted to get out. I just wanted to drop out of school. I didn't want to be in school. And so... I just started hanging around dropped out of school and stayed hanging around the people that I know. But the whole time I was interested in music, and I ended up recording some demo tapes of me and Razor. And I ended up selling the demo tapes. And me and Razor made some money off it. But Razor, he always tends to get into trouble, right? And so we never really stayed. He gets in trouble, he gets out of trouble. He gets in trouble, he gets out of trouble. And so he still raps, he still makes a lot of albums. I contact people in the entertainment industry. I grew to be what you call an alternate researcher. I look at it more like a historical, independent researcher of history. That's why I view myself. But people say, "Oh, you're a conspiracy researcher." I said, "Well, if that's how people feel about it, then that's what it is." Then, but I was more interested in doing alternative research on subjects that were older, subjects from like the 50s, 60s, 70s. And a lot of the interviews that I have are predominantly people in the independent research culture, or it's people who are entertainers themselves, rappers, and I'll contact people. If somebody's famous, it doesn't make any difference to me. They're still a person. I look at everybody like, I look at famous people just like the regular people. If somebody's famous, it doesn't impress me. If somebody is in movies or has their own entourage of people and all that stuff, that doesn't, people are people, So, but I contact people. I do interviews, music interviews with different sorts of rappers and stuff. And these people know me. I know them. I can be a very likable person. So, where's this conversation? Where is this interview? Where is this recording going? Trying to think. What was I talking about the music industry? One of the things about the music industry, I explained this in one of my metaphysical mentoring classes, is you can do what's called a poor man's copyright. You can make a CD or make a tape and mail it to yourself from yourself. And I'm not giving legal advice. This isn't legal advice. I'm just talking about something I have perceived. But the poor man's copyright, you mail a tape or a CD to yourself from yourself, and you don't open it. Well, there's a federal postage stamp on it. Anytime you have a postal stamp on something, that makes it federal, and so it's a form of a federal copyright. You don't open it, you keep it, and if anybody says, "Hey man, you stole my music," and if it ever goes to court, you show the judge, Your Honor, I have Exhibit A. I want to submit this evidence. This is a tape, a recording we had from me to me with the United States postal stamp, and has never been opened. Well, the judge will call a postal worker down there to inspect the package. They'll say, yeah, it's never been opened, and the date on this is way before the claim was made. So that's the poor man's copyright. And so I learned at an early age, the music industry has a lot of loopholes and tricks and stuff. You can learn a lot of stuff. You can be a professional without having professional connections. So what else? What else was something timesheets? How you time yourself into a studio if you're going to be running a music studio or a rock musician studio, you know, rap, rock, whatever, you have the artists do little sheets where they sign in and sign out. And so naturally, people started coming to me and asking me about this stuff. They said, how do you master the music? How do you master the sound? How do you make the tempo go up or the tempo go down? Like people want to screw their music, like DJ screw. You bring the tempo down. You know, you can do all sorts of stuff to the music. And mastering the music, I used to explain to people about the overdubs. How somebody doesn't know what an overdub is. You have one vocal that runs, one line that runs, and then you do that, then you come back in and do another line. That's why if you ever hear a song and you hear people talking in the background, like, how do they do that? You know, they don't do it all at once. They record multiple lines, multiple tracks. There's one track with the chorus. You hear the chorus in the song or the rap song or whatever. Then you hear the lead vocal. So you have a chorus and the lead vocal, and that's how you complete a song. And so I would sit down and explain this stuff to people, and the people would kind of trip off it, like, you know, we're just used to freestyle. We don't know how to make real music. And, you know, you show people a little bit and they take it and do it themselves. So now I was explaining, what else was I explaining? Now I was explaining how Muskegon is a very small area. There's an area called Jackson Hill that's well known. If there's an area called Jackson Hill that's well known. And most of these people's family, in the black community, most of these people migrated up here from Mississippi. Most of these families in Muskegon migrated, if they're black, they migrated up here from Mississippi predominantly to come find work, to find jobs. When the auto industry was booming and the factory jobs were booming, people wanted to come here to find work. And so they would migrate here from Mississippi. So my father came up here. My father was born back in 1939. They came up here from Mississippi. A lot of other families came up here from. One second, I'm going to get a book I have about Muskegon. Hold on. Alright, so here's a book about Muskegon. And most of these people in Muskegon never actually leave Muskegon. That's one of the down things about Muskegon is people just stay here their whole life. And me, myself, I like to leave. I don't think anything of just taking off and leaving. Like if I have the money, I'll go. I'll just take off and show up somewhere on Sunset Boulevard outside the House of Blues. Or I'll just take off and show up somewhere where I know there's famous people and stuff. I'll just start talking to people and hanging out with people. And that's just how I am. And I'll tell them my name. I'll tell them I'm from Muskegon. And I'll just start asking questions about the music industry. Man, what happened back in 65? What happened back in 63? Like, man, where you come from? Like, I'm from Muskegon, blah, 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 blah. And that's just how I am. I just, you know, I'm a worldly person. But, okay. Muskegon used to be really big into the, like my grandfather, they all grew up working at these foundries. Like, this is a famous place where people work growing up in Muskegon right here. The Shaw Walker Company Furniture Factory was founded in about 1899 by A.W. Shaw and L.C. Walker. The company produced office furniture including wooden cabinets to house file cards, steel filing cabinets, and low desks built for the comfort of the office worker. The building is now the Watermark Center. Part of the building of Watermark's mixed-use development has been converted into residential lofts. And you can see the people working. This book. A. Harold Fronthal A. Harold Frauenthal. That's where the Frauenthal theater comes from. The chairman of the board of Kadin Corporation. Picture on the left looking at precision grinding equipment. Kadin, and the world's largest manufacturer of ball and roller bearings, was founded in 1941 and celebrated its 75th anniversary in 2016. The company was named for Frauenthal's children, Kay and Don. And all these factories are gone. I mean, the majority of them are gone. And me, myself, I like to study the deep stuff. Like Charles Hackley, there used to be the Hackley Bank, and I don't believe the Hackley Bank is around anymore. But the Hackley Bank was owned by Charles Hackley, and during the Civil War, Charles Hackley, I'll start off like this. Mississippi used to be the richest state in the Union. Before the end of the Civil War, Mississippi sold cotton all over the world. And Mississippi was the richest state in the United States of America, the richest state. And when the Confederacy went up against when the Union Confederacy War started, what people call this American Civil War, the Union was stealing or taking the Confederacy's gold and bringing it up to Michigan, and through the Hackley Bank, they were sending it over to Chicago, or through Chicago it was coming over to the Hackley Bank. And so a lot of the money that came through Muskegon in the 1800s was actually Confederate money. Muskegon made a lot of money off the lumber industry. There was more millionaires in Muskegon than any other place, but a lot of the money that came through Muskegon came from the Confederacy through Hackley Bank. Basically, they were laundering the Confederacy's money. And so Muskegon has, you got to imagine how many boats are on Lake Michigan that have sunk. There's a lot of boats on Lake Michigan that have sunk. There's a lot of gold in the boats, right? What else? And then there's that whole thing about Charles Hackley and Billy the Kid. Makes you wonder if Charles Hackley actually knew Billy the Kid, and that's what people have been saying. People have been saying that. If Charles Hackley actually knew Billy the Kid, and he had the Hackley Bank, and he was taking the Confederacy's money, was Billy the Kid working for? Is it a possibility that Billy the Kid was working for Charles Hackley, sticking people up, getting the gold, and bringing it through the bank? Is that a possibility? That's interesting. But Charles Hackley has a wonderful reputation. He put a lot of schools in the area, and he built Muskegon up to be what it is today. Muskegon never would have been what it is today without Charles Hackley or the Hume, Charles and the Hume family. Just like you have Wood Street, the Wood family, and whatnot. Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of what I did. So that's kind of how I grew up in Muskegon. When I grew up in Muskegon, the industrial age was well over. All the factories were still here. But, I grew up learning predominantly. I think my grandfather taught me the most. My grandfather taught me more than anything. But I grew up, hanging around a lot of people in the heights. And I learned a lot from a lot of different people. But I love getting out of this area and going out and researching. Like, I just love studying and reading books and learning. I think a lot of knowledge, I think some of the most important knowledge, you don't find it in schools. It's hard to obtain. And so that's sort of what I've dedicated my life to, was attaining knowledge that you cannot find in school books. Predominantly because I don't like school. I never liked school. If you were to find some of my friends, I might even call some of the people I know from school, just to get them in an interview or something. But a lot of people I went to school with, if you were to ask them what was going on with me in school, they would just say, like, Jameel. They'd be like, he never really he did go to school, but he didn't go to school. I laughed the whole time. I thought everything was a joke. like I'd make fun of the teachers and the students and stuff, not ridiculously, but I just didn't like school. I just didn't like school. I just didn't think. I thought the schoolwork was biased, and then I'd bring up points in school, like in history class. I'd be sitting there telling I'd just tell them what I thought. I'd tell the history class what I thought, and sometimes the teachers just didn't like it. They'd say, "Well, that's not what's in the history books. This is what we're doing," and I'd just say, "Well, you know, but what if the history books are wrong? I'm supposed to memorize wrong information? I don't want to memorize wrong information." So it just didn't go with me. School just didn't go with me. So I spent a lot of time in my life studying alternative, independent lessons. And what else am I going to get into? What else am I going to get into? And I have family in other parts. I have family in Detroit. Man, I went to I was going to tell people, I ended up in Baldwin Punk Prison. It's a long story. I was hanging around I was 17, I was hanging around people in my age group, and people just wanted some liquor and some booze and stuff. You know how young people in high school are. And so, you know, I was with them, and we wanted to get some liquor, so we ended up, you know, unfortunately, I'd never give somebody advice to do anything. I'd never tell somebody to do anything illegal. Unfortunately, we wanted to get the booze, and so I ended up getting in trouble and getting put on probation for it. We took it from a garage, and the garage was attached to the house. The garage door was open, but it was attached to the house, which made it a serious crime. And I got put on probation for it. The probation didn't work out too well, so I ended up having my probation revoked, and so I ended up at the punk prison. And the funny part about it was when I explained it to people, they're just like, "You went to jail for stealing beer out of a garage?" You know, it just didn't make sense. And so, you know, what was I going to say? A lot of the people, I'm trying to think back on my life at the time. A lot of the people that I met in there were more serious criminals, people with murders and stuff like this. A lot of them were from Detroit. Now, when I got there, my cousin was actually running the little black Muslim group that was in there, and he's, of course, is from Muskegon, so that kind of shocked me when I seen that. And I didn't even know he was there. And he was just like, "Jameel," I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "Don't worry about anything." And everybody and all the serious criminals in there were nice to me. They were like, "Man, that's your cousin." Blah 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 blah. I was like, "Yeah." And I'd be sitting there, and 1 second they'd be playing cards with me, being nice to me, and a second later they'd be beating somebody in the head with a lock and a sock. And I just be like, "Damn!" Like whoa. They were like, "Man, no." They'd be like, "Jameel, don't go over there," and I wouldn't go over there, and they'd be over there about to kill somebody, and I just like, "Wow, that's crazy." And so I grew up seeing a lot of these people. Now, Detroit is huge. Detroit is, of course, in Michigan. Detroit is huge, and a lot of the rappers from Detroit are some of the best rappers, but they don't have any opportunities. Like when you talk about Detroit, I had met a lot of the guys from who grew up. Their family members were from like YBI, Young Boys Incorporated, or like they all knew the Chambers Brothers and whatnot. But in Detroit, a lot of them used to be like, "Hey, you know Rock Bottom?" I'm like, "I never heard Rock Bottom." They tell me about Rock Bottom, the Street Lords, the Cheddar Boys, whatnot. So I'd sit there and listen to the rap from Detroit. I'm like, "Man, that's really good music." But Detroit didn't have a main. You know, when Motown left Detroit, there was no mainstream record association anymore. Once Motown left Detroit, that was it. And so then until Eminem is probably the only real rapper from Detroit in recent time that's ever made it as far as he did. You know, I'm trying to think of people from Detroit who rap. There's not too many. There's a lot of good rappers from Detroit, but there's not too many of them that ever really made it too far in the music industry, like on a mainstream level, right? Some of them are pretty well known, but they never got that mainstream appreciation. Where is this going? What am I talking about? So that was my life when I was younger, growing up, and so I've grown out of all that. When people come around me, my main thing is don't do anything illegal. Like I don't do any. Like I do interviews with people, I hang out with people, but I'm not into anything illegal. I don't like people around me who are doing illegal activity. If somebody has drugs or something, I try to stay away from that. I don't want to be. I don't know if the individual's gonna try to set me up or something, or try to get me in trouble. I don't trust people around me. But what I do now is alternative research, and this is back in my teenager. What I do now is alternative research and channeling. I channel reptilians. I got a thing where I'm on my cosmic science channel where I'm channeling great reptilians. And a lot of people don't get that. A lot of people might see that and be like, why are you like, you're saying you're channeling a lizard being? A lot of people don't get that. You have to be aware of it gets into like beyond angels and things like that. There's other spiritual beings out there in the universe, and human beings are telepathic, and you can create communication with these other beings. There's a lot of well-known psychics out there who do it. There's on the History Channel, they talk about ancient aliens all the time. So I guess it's just an area of broader discussion. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm not crazy. I'm not stupid. I'm not confused. I'm not on drugs. I'm just into the spiritual nature of the greater parts of the universe, and I'm aware that humans are not the only intelligent creatures on the planet. My awareness is just higher than most people about how creation works. That's it. But where is my? I'm looking for something else to bring up. That's pretty much what I do. If you know me, you know I just want to be left alone, and I don't want trouble. I want to be left alone. That's all I want. Do my research and be left alone. Where is my notes? I have stacks of notes. I'm trying to think what happened. I'm gonna have to hold on 1 second. Where's my notes? Part of what I used to do is study dim mak. Dim mak is a form of martial arts. Like if you shake somebody's hands, there's a point right here where you can just stick your finger into their. It's like not really a pressure point, but a paralyzation point. Or there's points, like if you hit somebody in certain areas, you can set them down on the ground quick. I had a good friend of mine who taught Aikido, and we used to spend hours. He used to teach me about it, how you can work with somebody's gravitational pull. As I can walk up to you and grab you like this, as hard as I can, and pull you towards me, and just throw you on the ground, and it'll be your own weight that does it. Instead of hitting the person in the mouth, you just grab them, pull them towards you, and just throw them back like that. Or if somebody's coming towards you to grab you, your own weight, usually grab their arm and pull them towards you with your own weight. It was studies like that got me into what you call meditation, Zen meditation, or Shinto Buddhism. And I started reading more about the Shaolin monks. And the Shaolin monks are a part of a famous monastery. The Shaolin Temple is a famous monastery. They have one in northern China, and I believe now they have one in southern China. And then I became aware of chi energy, and I had a friend who was Japanese, whose father was from Okinawa, and he used to teach us Japanese, and he used to teach us a little bit about martial arts and different sorts of things. And so my research on the Far East elevated my mind, and made me more, I would say, more well-rounded. It taught me the difference between an Eastern philosophy and a Western philosophy. If you grew up in the United States, you have a Western philosophy where the way you think and the way you interpret information is based solely on somebody in America. If you go to China or you go to Japan, the philosophy is the Eastern philosophy, and it's a lot different than American philosophy. For instance, in Japan, they have the harakiri, where based on samurai tradition, they will commit suicide. And that's an honorable thing in Japan. Even today, if students get poor test scores, they'll commit suicide. In America, suicide is looked at as being frowned upon. Like, if you commit suicide, you're looked upon as being weak. You disrespected yourself. You're trying to hurt yourself. That's a weakness. But in the Far East, it's an honorable thing that you laid your life down for a higher cause, like the kamikaze. So after looking into martial arts and speaking to people from the Far East, then I learned the East-West philosophy, how Western thinkers interpret reality like this, Eastern thinkers interpret reality like that. And I used to tell people about this stuff. I used to have all sorts of friends. I used to tell them about this stuff. And growing up on the streets, you come across street organizations, right? Like in Michigan, or I think Chicago, I think, maybe in lower Michigan, but in Chicago, there's all sorts of street organizations. Not just the Black Muslims, what else is? 5%ers. Those groups have a lot of knowledge and information. A lot of people in the black community reach out to 5%er type groups and the Black Muslim type groups. So I learned to mix Eastern philosophy. I learned a little bit from each different group like that. Growing up, I did. I sit there and talk to different people, learn different sorts of information. And so now that I'm able to go online and read books, I'm able to really get a good interpretation for the world. Places like Africa, how you have ancestral prayer, and you don't learn about ancestral prayer in the United States mainly. Most people don't know anything about ancestral prayer. But I learned about stuff like that from watching the natives in Africa. Now, these are my notes. I'm going to see. I just sit here and read and write notes and study. Parapsychology, that's something I've been speaking a lot about lately. I'll skip over that for right now. The caduceus and Asclepius, whatever. I was speaking about that, about symbolism. Yeah, symbolism's a big subject that I studied for years. How if you go to the chevron, you see the chevron, you see that's occult symbolism. Like Arco gas station is occult symbolism. The word Arco, what does it come from? The arcane. The word Arco means fallen. Comes back to fallen angels. Like the shell on Shell gas station is actually a sun rising. The shell of the gas station was actually a shell rising. If you look back to the Shell logo, you can see how the logo has changed over the years. It's gone through many different phases. There's the 1900 Shell, the 1904, 1909, 1930, 1948, 55, 61, 71, 95 to 99. And this is no secret. This stuff has been popularized by a lot of different independent researchers. This isn't anything I discovered, but it's just something I came across. And you can see how the shell went from actually being a shell in 1900 to going to the sun rising logo, just like the Japanese flag is the sun, the morning sun. It even goes into other areas. Symbolism. Banks look like churches. This is something I want people to check out. Why do banks look so much like churches? Banks look exactly like churches. The way a modern bank looks like, it looks just like a church. A bank looks just like a church. Like those two snakes on the caduceus or the Asclepius, whatever. Like one has two snakes, one has one snake. Two snakes also, a lot of people don't bring this up in the independent research culture, but two snakes also are symbolic of the yin and the yang. They mean life and death, because if you get bit by a snake, you may die, but the only way to get out of death is through the anti-venom of the venom of the snake. So if I get bit by a snake, I need snake venom to live, the anti-venom. So one snake represents life. One snake represents the ability to kill and the ability to heal. So, two snakes in the ancient Egyptians had anti-venom. So in ancient Egypt, the two snakes meant science, medicine, and that's the first thing you're going to need from a doctor in Egypt is anti-venom from a snake. So snakes could kill you, or snakes could heal you. That's when you see the two snakes together. Very few people say that. trying to find the snake. I gotta go back through my notes again. We're almost over. This is about 40 minutes anyway. These are some of my older business cards. I think I've shown these before, but when I meet people, that's what I come in contact with them with. The chakra system, astral projection. So a lot of people have never heard of these subjects. I'll be sitting there speaking to people. I'll be like, this is my card. And I'll say, have you ever heard of astral projection? I'll say, what do you mean astral projection? Have you ever heard of astral projection? Have you ever heard of dream interpretation or lucid dreaming or ET genetics? And it's so funny because I'll go back to the same neighborhoods I came from, and I'll be speaking to people, and people are still doing dirt. People will still be doing dirt. People will still be out there shooting people and drugs and stuff like that, and I'm sitting there with business cards talking about, if I go back to like an older neighborhood where some of these areas the same stuff goes on as it did back then, I'll be talking to the people. I'll be like, look, this is my card, this is my business card. I want to talk about astral projection. And the guy that I'm talking to would be somebody I know. Right, and this guy, he looks like this guy is getting ready to go kill a motherfucker, probably. You know, excuse my language. This guy is getting ready to go do some dirt, and I'm sitting up here talking about astral projection. See how see how crazy that is? Lucid dreaming. Aura reading, chakra cleaning. So if somebody comes to you and they say that they're an independent researcher, you have to look at what they're into, what they're doing. If somebody is truly an independent researcher, they're going to have investments into it. You say, what have you invested into your research? I say, what do you mean, what have I invested into it? I have all kinds of business cards, all kinds of interviews. I've devoted my whole life. What do you mean, what have I invested in? I have my whole life devoted. If you're somebody that's an actual independent researcher, their whole life is going to be invested into it. That's not just something they do. That's who they are. I'm an independent reader. That's who I am. It's not something I do. It's who I am. That's just who I am. And so I see people I'll see people that are still the same way they were back when I was growing up. Motherfuckers still out there in the streets doing dirt, and I'm like, that's not what I do anymore. I do ESP and channeling. I don't do that kind of stuff. Where's my? I got some other business cards too that I used. I got a lot of stuff. I got all kinds of stuff. There's a chakra. This is representative of the chakra system. Like, this representative of the 7 chakras. Where's my chakra stone? Hold on one second. Let me find my chakra. Can't find them. I'll bring them back in another video. I had my chakra stones, but anyway, what I started out with in the video, I was talking about rappers, rap music, people in the area. Trying to think, what else do I want to say? I'll come back and do another one after. I gotta get my. I got other trinkets and other memorabilia and all that stuff. Stuff I have pertaining. Stuff I have pertaining. I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna find my chakra stones and come back.